Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Museum of the Albemarle for today's History for Lunch presentation. We're glad that y'all could join us. If you are here in the auditorium, we ask that you please mute your cell phones. And for those of you all on Zoom, please mute your microphones and use the chat for your questions. As always, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the lecture. Couple things. You probably noticed we are having a summer fun day today that's going around us here on the first floor of the museum. So be sure on your way out to check out. We have folks from Somerset Place State Historic Site, which is in Are We There Yet? Just next door here. Be sure to visit them, as well as the Outer Banks History Center, which ties in perfectly to today's theme. They are just near the doors out in the lobby as y'all are heading out. Next, History for Lunch is scheduled for Wednesday, August the 6th at noon. Mr. Edward Fearing will be back again. He's going to take us through photographs from Old Nag's Head. So going back probably about 125 years, bringing us up into somewhat of the present day. If y'all have been here for some of Mr. Fearing's lectures before, they're always very well attended, a lot of fascinating photographs. So we hope that y'all will join us for that on August the 6th. Now, today we welcome Robin Daniels Holt. She is an author, local historian, and she has written a new book called My Daily Bounded Realm, a journal of daily life in the Outer Banks in 1900. So it chronicles the lives of women in the Outer Banks in the early 20th century. There will also be a book signing following the lecture out in the hallway at the museum shop, and y'all can purchase her book in the museum shop as well. So please join us in welcoming Ms. Holt to the podium.
Well, good afternoon. This is something new for me. Can I push this down? Yeah. All right. Can you see me? Well, I don't know the Zoom thing. A lot of people have asked me why I wrote a book. If anybody had told me 5 years ago that I'd be writing a book, I would have laughed right out loud. I never aspired to write a book. However, I was at the History Center in Manio, and I ran across some diaries written by a lady, Lily Jacobs Baum, and she lived in Pine Island, and her husband was a traveling doctor. And the pharmacy company sent him little day books. They were probably about yay big, and he didn't use them, but she put them to good use. Every day for 46 years, she wrote a diary entry. Some of them were long and went all the way around the page, and some to the next page or whatever. But there was one in her book that triggered something in my little mind, and it said, hog work. And I'm not a farm girl by any stretch. I'm a fisherman's daughter from Wanchese. If she'd have put shad work or bluefish work, I'd have known what that meant. But hog work, I wasn't sure. And that was all she wrote that day. So I thought, okay, what did that mean for her in her daily life? Well, come to find out, it meant a lot. That was all she had time to do, was hog work. They killed a hog that day, and everything that she normally did in her life stopped. The laundry, the cooking, the cleaning, sewing, whatever else she was doing had to stop. It ceased because they had to process that hog before it rotted. I'm sure if we have any farmers around or old fellows that grew up in Camden County, I'm sure you know that. That was news for me. So I thought, well, what else did it mean in a woman's daily life? Because there's lots of books written about the life-saving servicemen, the lighthouse keepers, fishermen, farmers, all of the other manly things. But there's nothing recorded per se about a woman's life. So it is now, especially for our Hatteras Island women, because without the women, this turns. How's that? Without the women in Hatteras Island, the men couldn't have done anything. God love them, and they worked hard, and they provided for their families, but they got up, got their clothes on, ate breakfast, and were gone. sometimes until 10, 11 o'clock at night. The stores stayed open late down there. I think there were two in the Chickamauga area, and they stayed open late so that when the men came home from fishing or whatever they had been doing, duck hunting or whatever, they went to the store instead of going straight home because they could chit chat and carry on and compare and make up lies with each other. We all know about that. So in my research for what a woman really did, I used a lot of stories from people that I contacted down the beach. And did you know that there wasn't electricity down the beach until after 1950? Now, when you go down there now, you know it's all beautiful and there's all these big homes and all this tourist drive and all this wonderful stuff. But in 1950, they didn't have electricity. They didn't have roads. They had a telegraph. The telegraphs were hooked up to each life-saving station. So that was how information transferred. But as far as electricity, not a drop. I remember my mom telling stories. She was raised in Salvo. Excuse me. And I remember her telling stories of World War II, where they had to have the blackout curtains on the windows because of all the activity in the ocean. And it never dawned on me that they didn't have electricity. They had lanterns, you know, like a kerosene lantern or oil lantern. I think they use a lot of whale oil. So there were no modern conveniences. Probably the most modern convenience a woman had would have been a good broom, a sharp knife, a good stick to stir soup with or wash clothes, probably the same stick, and maybe a bowl, a good bowl that was a multi-purpose. There wasn't a lot of money down on the Outer Banks, but there were fish. So there was a lot of bartering done between down the banks people and the mainland people and Elizabeth City. Oh, and coming to Elizabeth City was a real joy. That was like a vacation because there was electricity here. Running water. We didn't have running water down the beach until way, way later. We had one of those pumps from the Sanders Company. You're familiar with the Sanders Company? Those red pumps. Yeah, I still got one. So anyway, in looking and researching for that, I ran across this poem that was written in the Elizabeth City newspaper. Elizabeth City plays a big role in our history. I don't know if y'all realize that, but it does. It's called A Woman's World. It was in the Weekly Economist, excuse me, June the 2nd, 1891. And this is what it says. With many a turn my steps I take, in many a crook and crevice, and many a biscuit I must bake for Maud and me and Lovis. I sweep, I dust, I cook, I rise, up in the morning early. I wash the breakfast dishes and I churn and dress the baby. I make the dust and dry leaves fly against my new broom fairly. I chatter, chatter as I go, because I rest so rarely. For men may come and men may go, yet I go on forever. I go on forever. I move about and in and out, while here the chickens feeding, and here and there a hawk to shout, but little are they heeding. I walk, I run, I skip, I hop from one thing to another. I stop to dress or bruise a cut, for the children run to mother. Then to the garden I must go to see what work is needed, for plants must be set out, you know, and then they must be weeded. For men can't stop, for they must go, but we work on forever, ever. We work on forever. I scrape the tray and put to rights the dining room and kitchen, and then I go in my room to sew and try to do some stitching. I wonder if there is on earth no respite from our labors, no time to go and gossip some with pleasant, friendly neighbors. Before I end this piece of work and try to think a little, I throw it down and run and make a fire and put on the kettle. For men must eat and go, you know, but women can go never. Yes, men will come and men will go, but we work on forever, forever. We work on forever. And that pretty much sums up this book. The people in my book were alive in my daily bounded realm. These are my ancestors, 4 generations back. I chose to write, as my second great grandmother, Martha. She was alive and well in 1900, living down at Clarksville, which is now Salvo, North Carolina. Anybody been to Salvo? Everybody been to Salvo? There probably wasn't much there then. But anyway, she raised 13 children. At the time of this writing in 1900, she had 5 sons and a grandson that she was raising, and 2 teenage daughters at home. She was one of the blessed women because she did have daughters at home that could do. One of her sisters-in-law didn't have any girls at all. She had like 12 boys. I don't know how much those boys learned as far as washing clothes and keeping things clean and the things that daughters would learn in order to become good wives. So what I'm going to do is I wrote, if you read the book, there's a journal entry every day for 1900 in here that she wrote, but she didn't write it. I wrote it. I made it all up. It's potentially true. I went through newspapers and read what was happening in surrounding areas and read lots of books on gardening and how to do laundry and fun stuff like that without running water, without hot water. So I wrote a journal entry for her every day. And then I tried to explain what that might have meant. Keeping a fire burning in the fall and winter and even into the spring, a woman could have spent up to 4 hours a day, not straight, but collectively 4 hours a day, keeping the fires going because she was the only one home to do it. She had to cut the wood, bring the wood in, find the wood. There were more trees down on the island in 1900, but she had to get the wood, cut it, chop it, bring it in the house, clean the ashes out, keep the stove polished to keep it from rusting, because you know what salt water does to iron, and salt air. So she could spend up to 4 hours a day. That's a lot of time to spend keeping a stove going, keeping the heat in the house, along with all the other things that she had to do without electricity, without a mixer, without running water. So her day was very, very busy. She was blessed, like I say, to have 2 daughters at home that still could do and were capable. So what I'd like to do is read a couple of entries from the book. And I'm going to start with April the 25th. Her entry says, "The wire cloth came today for our windows. Fair and Bill," Fair was her husband, "and Bill made the frames for some of the windows with leftover wood from the new kitchen. The kitchen will be nice. Louisa cooked our meals today. Frank's girl, Alice, is 18 today." And then to explain that wire cloth, Gilbert and Bennett, a Connecticut-based company that made sieves, is credited with the invention of the modern window screen. Did y'all know that? From Connecticut. The company's business suffered during the Civil War, being no longer able to sell their products in the southern states. An enterprising employee had an idea that changed history. Thank God for him. Paint the wire cloth to prevent it from rusting and sell it for use as window screens. The idea took off, and the company made the production of wire cloth a major part of its business. Homeowners would purchase the wire cloth and then nail it to wooden window and door frames they constructed. The firm later introduced steel wire, which did not rust. Window screens not only made houses more comfortable, they also had a direct impact on health as they kept disease-carrying insects out of homes. Over time, the incidence of these diseases declined dramatically. Can you imagine being on salvo and not having any screens in your window in July or August or September? Or how about those yellow flies? Can you imagine? I'd have been ill. I'd have been ill all the time. I'd have been mad. And everybody around me would probably be mad too. But anyway, they got screens. And I'm sure they came from some store in Elizabeth City. They almost had to have. Let's go to May the 12th. Now, this is a big day for her because we all know about the Hotel Roanoke. In Manio, it now looks like the Tranquil House Inn. Everybody familiar with that? Anybody seen that? Well, there used to be a hotel there called the Hotel Roanoke, built by Mr. Evans, and it was where the boat launch parking lot is now, right before you go over to what we call Ice Plant Island, where the History Center is and the concert venue there. And it was an outstanding hotel. They had running water. They had a windmill outside that pumped the water in. And they had electricity. So Fair had decided to take Martha for the weekend up. They had family that lived there, Fair's brothers. Two of his brothers lived up there, so they were able to visit with them. But he wanted to take her to the hotel. So this is what she wrote on Saturday, May the 12th. I can say I am ready to meet the Maker. I have washed in a bathtub with running water, hot and cold, and used an indoor flush toilet. What sinful pleasure. I wonder if we could build a small windmill down home to pump water like here. Don't know how, but maybe one day. It cost us 25 cents more than the $1.50 per day, but Fair said we could do it. My goodness, it makes life easier. Makes me want to move to Manio. Fair just laughed when I told him that. Me and Zilly had a good time together today. We went to almost all the stores in town, found some fabric in Jerry Midget's store that would be good for the parlor window now that cooking will be in the new kitchen, and some for the boys' new pants. Fair wanted some of that new denim. Grace, the girl in the store, said they had some bolts from the mills in Greensboro, so I got some of that for him. Got the girls some hair combs. Evans's store is a whole mess of the most hardware I've ever seen. Fair liked being in there. We had lunch, as they call dinner, up there at the Tranquil House out in their flower garden, while Fair was talking out on the docks. It was like a fairy tale, and it was fun. Got some of the prettiest buttons at Joe Evans Mercantile. They have the most to choose from in town. Don't know what I'd do if I lived in Manio. I'd probably have more buttons than the stores. There's a new milliner in town, a Miss Georgie Harrison. Zilly said that she gets along right good with Miss Sophia. They sure do make some pretty hats. We tried some on and laughed at each other. Silly old women. Food at the hotel was odd, but tasted all right for once in a while. The dining room looks out over the creek, so the view is nice. People come here from all over just to sit in that dining room and eat. Mr. Gould, the proprietor, is from the north. Zilly said he is well known in Massachusetts for his cooking and hosting. The plates look mighty fancy when they come out to the table, almost too pretty to eat, but we did. I was so tired after supper that I took another bath with the best soap and went right away to sleep. With the window open a bit, the water lapping sounded a lot like home, and this bed, oh, this bed. So those things that we seem to take so for granted were such a luxury for her to be able, and all of that is based on newspaper reports and the different stores, the ads in the newspapers at the time advertised those wonderful things. And then a lady in Manio, Mrs. Bell, had written a memoir, and a lot of that information came from her stuff. So imagine finding pretty buttons and being able to touch all those buttons. I'm a fabric guru, so when I go in a fabric store, I have to touch every piece of fabric in there. I'm sure she probably felt the same way over the buttons. And then we're all familiar with the life-saving service. Well, the women had a big part in that too. The her husband had been in the life-saving service, but he didn't stay very long. He I think he must have probably been somebody who couldn't just sit around and wait for something to happen. He was one of those fellows that had to get up and make it happen because he was busy his whole life. He was a shipwreck commissioner, where for that job you are in charge. You're appointed by the governor, I believe, to be a wrecker, and you're in charge of the shipwreck. When it comes ashore, you gather all the stuff up and then you take it to Manio to auction it, or auction it around the beach according to what it was, and then you got a percentage. He had a salt business where he um, did reverse osmosis with the ocean water. And of course, they didn't call it that then, but he would sell salt, and he had to pay a tax on that. And I found that in the tax records, census report tax record. He was also an avid hunter. And you think about hunting, you think about just eating it. Well, back in 1900, feathers were a big commodity in New York, in Paris, because all the ladies had to have these hats with all these feathers on them. Ostrich, of course, was the favorite because it was a big plume. But the tiny little feathers from ducks, we've all seen a wood duck and know the different variety of feathers on that. They sold for a fortune. The piping plovers and the terns, they have tiny little short feathers, but they're sturdy, so they would hold up on a hat. And of course, they ate the terns. I didn't know that. Did y'all know that? They ate terns, shorebirds. They said they were good. I didn't know that. Thought that was kind of cool. The life-saving service, there was one in every village, of course, and some between. But when people were shipwrecked, they lost everything, more than likely, during the shipwreck. I found a photo of the Kohler rescue, and of course, they rescued the captain and his wife. And the photo shows the wife in a man's suit. The ladies in all over the country, I guess, made clothing and took it to the life-saving stations, so that when someone was shipwrecked and they lost everything, I mean, lots of people were picked up on the beach with just shreds of their clothing. They had something to wear. But I don't think they planned on ladies being shipwrecked. So for years, people wondered why she was in a suit. Well, that's why, because they didn't make dresses for life-saving service people. They made suits. So this lady is on deck with her husband right beside her, and she's got a suit, coat on, and a shirt, pants, and men's boots. And that was supplied by the ladies down the beach who sewed and put those things together. Oh, let's see. June the 24th. I think that's it. Death was a big factor down there. A lot of children are in a lot of cemeteries in Salvo, and all down the beach. There's one beside my house in Wanchese, actually, that has 6 little tombstones lined up, all from the same family. It affected the whole community because more than likely they died of a childhood disease that was contagious, tuberculosis. My great grandmother on another side passed away from the Spanish influenza. But children greatly affected everybody, just like they do for us today. On Sunday, June the 24th, she writes that the preacher talked that the Lord gives and the Lord takes. Not very healing to hurting mothers and families that have lost children. It just ain't right for young'uns to die before their old folk kin. Our hearts are still broke when we think of Carlina and Sarah. Carlina was her daughter who died in childbirth. The grandchild that she was raising was Carletta's child, Wesley. Now, let's talk about some recipes. Y'all like recipes, don't you? Old recipes. Well, I bet you've not ever heard of this one. She says Heaven help us. So hot today, we took off for swimming. Felt like I couldn't get enough clothes off to get cool. Salty ocean water helped at least cool us for a while. The boys dug up enough sand flea crabs to make a broth for stew. Might have to wait till it cools though. There's a recipe here for mole crab chowder. And this was from an old cookbook. Y'all ever heard of that? Mole crab chowder. I've had it. It tastes like stewed crabs. It's a little bit sandy, so you have to be careful. But you can cook with just about anything the ocean provides. And they knew that. They ate turtle. They ate mole crabs. They ate the shorebirds that were running up and down the beach. Of course, all the fish that came out of the ocean. I'm sure they even probably tried skate. I've never tried that. Anybody tried skate? I haven't either. I don't want to. I did have shark. The recipe is real simple. It's almost like you steam the crabs, take them out. While the crabs are still in the broth, you mash thoroughly with a potato masher. So you mash those crabs all up. Strain through cheesecloth, retaining the broth, and discard the crabs. Simple, but if they were to put it with some potatoes, serve it with a biscuit or a dough, dumpling, it would feed the whole family. So that was one of the reasons that they ate everything that came up on the shore. July the 5th, she makes corncob jelly. Anybody ever had corncob jelly? Yeah, did you like it? It's interesting, isn't it? She writes, "Oh, the flies, 'tis miserable out. They bite and leave big old welts. Young'uns worrying all day about bites. Wesley has some sores that don't look good. I made a new brew of tincture because we were about out. Made corncob jelly with some of the cobs left from yesterday. Thank heavens for window screens and slamming screen doors." She was thankful for screen doors. I know my mama has said to me more times than I can count, "If you slam that door one more time," haven't y'all ever heard that or said that one time or another? Yeah. She was grateful for those screen doors. I do have a sample of corncob jelly because I had to make it. I had to know what it was. Out at the book signing table when we're done. And I thought it tasted a lot like corn syrup. But I'm sure it tasted like the best jelly in the world to them because it was made with sugar. And what you do is you boil your corn cobs after you cut the corn off. Or I'm sure they probably just ate the corn off and then boiled the cobs. I cut my corn off. I didn't eat it. So it's pure corn jelly. But I'd love for y'all to have a taste of that on the way out. Just like every other family, they had to do the best they could with what they had. On August the 15th, she says, "I woke up so sick this morning. Took some lobelia, but did not relief. The cork was not on tight, so it probably lost some of its gump. Bitters did better. Not much energy. I embroidered and slept some." So the bitters of the day was Hostetter's stomach bitters. It was invented in 1850 by Jacob Hostetter in San Francisco. His son moved to the East Coast after the Great Fire and began mass producing in 1853. The mixture contained small amounts of chinchona bark from South America, quinine, columbo is a herb, and gentian root. Its main ingredient at 47% was alcohol. It was so potent you could purchase in shops and some bars. Can you imagine purchasing a medicine in a bar? Sales of bitters increased during the Civil War. Northern medicine manufacturers preyed upon the troops who feared cholera, yellow fever, and dysentery, claiming bitters provided a positive protection from the fatal maladies of the swamps and the poisonous tendency of the impure rivers and bayous. At war's end, bitters had a devastating consequence. Veterans returned home addicted to them. An ad from The 1906 Daily News encourages a purchase. I've got one here that says, when hundreds of women, this is an ad, an actual ad in a newspaper. It says, when hundreds of women voluntarily endorse Hostetler stomach bitters, there can be no reason for doubting its ability to cure them. 47% alcohol. We therefore urge every woman who needs a strengthening and toning medicine to try Hostetler stomach bitters. At once, you'll receive immediate and lasting benefit. It cures cramps, backaches, dizziness, headache, costiveness, diarrhea, dyspepsia, and indigestion. Can you imagine? But that was a medicine of the day, 47% alcohol. And then on August the 18th, Virginia Dare's birthday. Saturdays were the days that the men brought in the boats and turned them upside down, and they would lime the boats to get all of the stuff that grows on the bottom of boats in the summertime, or mostly any time in that sound water. So the boats have been brought up, and it says, what a day was had here. Wesley and Spar burned up one of the skiffs, testing their skills playing with fire. This is the two little boys, 4 and 5-year-olds. No other boats were pulled up, and all of us managed to get it put out. Don't know who squalled the loudest, Liza or Martha Ann, when they first saw it. The boys were not hurt. They both might not sit for a day or two. Fair was as mad as I've ever seen him when he sailed in. Fair Jr., Graves, and Flory said not one word when their feet hit the shore, and Fair was still pitching a fit. When all the boats were put in, he got back in his and hasn't come back yet. Graves is worrisome that his boat coming from now might have to replace the burned up one. Boys will be boys, y'all. But losing a work skiff would be lost income. 2 brothers can fish from the same skiff, but only have the amount one brother would have caught. Fair would recognize this loss for his family. On Sunday, she writes, he came in around midnight, still upset, but thankful no one was hurt. He said we all did good to put the fire before it got to the house or sheds. We had put up a sheet on the pizer, so we cleaned up outside and just left our clothes out there. He was humming a hymn while he washed up, so I knew all was well. Went to church this morning. Wesley and Spar neither could get straight on the bench. Cold chicken and biscuits, sliced tomatoes, and fresh squash from the garden, and feed cake made us lazy all afternoon. November the 6th, this is another job that Fair had, her husband, because his father before him had done that. He was in charge of the election down the beach. This is where we get political. On the 6th, it says, Election Day. Fair left out of here like his pants were afire near about the crack of dawn. He's taken over what Mr. Bann used to do during election time. 30 years and women are still less. Hope one day we can vote. Then menfolk will take notice then. For the first 50 years of American elections, most voting wasn't done in private, and voters didn't even make their choice on a paper ballot. Instead, those with the right to vote, and that was only white men at the time, went to the local courthouse and publicly cast their vote out loud. Known as a viva voce, or voice voting, this form of public voting was the law in most states through the early 19th century. As voters arrived at the courthouse, a judge would have them swear on the Bible that they were who they said they were, and they hadn't already voted. You know that wasn't true, don't you? Once sworn in, the voter would call out his name to the clerk and announce his chosen candidate in each race. The first paper ballots began appearing in the early 19th century, but they weren't standardized or even printed by elections officials. In the beginning, paper ballots were nothing more than a scrap of paper on which the voter wrote his choices and dropped it into the ballot box. Newspapers began printing out blank ballots with the titles of each office up for vote that voting readers could tear out and fill in. No accountability was in place for duplicate voting. Wonder how many presidents were elected that way. Probably many. By the mid-19th century, state Republican and Democratic Party officials would distribute pre-printed flyers to voters listing only their party's candidates for office. They were called tickets because they resembled 19th century train tickets. The pre-printed ticket could be used as an actual ballot, making it easier to vote straight down the party line. The straight ticket. That's where that phrase came from. The 15th Amendment was ratified in Congress on February the 3rd, 1870, giving Black American men the right to vote. Before the 1900 presidential election, a congressional amendment made it law that in order to vote, the citizen must be able to read and write. While this was directed toward keeping the Black vote at bay, it also would have affected many white votes as well. According to the census, Fair could read or write, but Martha could not. Her two oldest children could read and write, but none of the rest of them could. So even though they were of age, they would not have been able to vote. Women were not granted the same freedom to vote in North Carolina until 1924, some 50 years later after men were given the right, white men. Fair's brother, Captain Little Bannister Midget, y'all familiar with Captain Bannister, the Merlot Rescue? This was Fair's brother, his younger brother. He is often quoted through family tales that our country went to hell in a handbasket when they gave women the right to vote. Doesn't that sound just like something one of them fellas from down the beach would say? Halloween. Yeah, is anybody familiar with Old Christmas? Everybody familiar with Old Christmas down the beach? Everybody knows what that is. And January the 5th, when there's a big old celebration down there. But I found out about Halloween. Halloween is an interesting holiday. Martha says she kept out a few turnips for the young'uns to make jack-lanterns. Liza and Martha Ann had fun scaring them with spooky poems found in one of them magazines. I reckon they'll have nightmares. Fair hid out in the graveyard and scared them all with a sheet. Never heard of such howling and him just a laughing. Halloween is believed to have originated primarily as a Celtic celebration marking the division of the light and dark halves of the year. Supposedly, and my DNA says that we are Scottish. A good portion of my DNA is Scottish and the rest of it is English. There's a lot of Irish descendants down the beach and Scottish as well. There's a lot of things that came up in my research that originated in Scotland. So I'm testifying I'm Scottish. During that pagan celebration, the boundary between the living and the dead was believed to be at its thinnest, and all manner of ghosts and fairies and demons, including the souls of the dead, were able to visit the living. In some parts of Ireland, Halloween is called Pookie Night, in reference to the puka, an especially mischievous fairy. This is the origin of the word spooky. When immigrants from Scotland, Ireland, and England came to North America, they brought the tradition of carving jack-o'-lanterns from pumpkins, not pumpkins, but potatoes or turnips. They soon discovered in this new world an even more suitable vegetable to carve. Can you guess? Pumpkins. They're an American vegetable fruit, pumpkins. Wearing costumes and masks as a disguise to ward off harmful spirits is another Celtic tradition. Now, this is a good one. The bones of slaughtered animals were cast into communal fires to aid the dead on their journey. People extinguished their home fires and relit them from the bone fire, the origin of today's bonfire. To celebrate the triumph of light over dark, meals were prepared for the living and the dead. Ritual offerings were left out to appease evil spirits that would otherwise bring bad luck to the home or the community. Other common Halloween customs included a family dinner followed by parlor games such as roasting nuts and bobbing for apples to divine one's future. Irishman Thomas More wrote a spooky poem in 1803 during a 3-month stay in the United States to mark the occasion of Halloween. He wrote this poem in Norfolk, Virginia, and it's called A Ballad, The Lake of the Dismal Swamp. They made her a grave too cold and damp for a soul so warm and true, and she's gone to the lake of the dismal swamp, where all night long by a firefly lamp she paddles her white canoe. And her firefly lamp I soon shall see, and her paddle I soon shall hear. Longing, loving, our life shall be, and I'll hide the maid in a cypress tree when the footstep of death is near. Away to the dismal swamp he speeds, his path was rugged and sore, through tangled juniper beds of reeds, through many a fern where the serpent feeds, and man never tread before. And when on the earth he sunk to sleep, if slumber his eyelids knew, he lay where the deadly vine doth weep its venomous tear and nightly steep the flesh with blistering dew. And near him the she-wolf stirred the brake, and the copper snake breathed in his ear, till he starting cried from his dream awake, "Oh, when shall I see the dusty lake and the white canoe of my dear?" He saw the lake, and a meteor bright quick over its surface played. "Come," he said, "my dear one's light." And the dim shore echoed for many a night the name of the death-cold maid, till he hauled a boat of the birchen bark, which carried him off from shore. Far, far he followed the meteor spark. The wind was high and the clouds were dark, and the boat returned no more. But off from the Indian hunter's camp, his lover and maid so true are seen at the hour of midnight damp to cross the lake by a firefly lamp and paddle their white canoe. So be careful you're going through the gentle swamp on Halloween. There's no telling what you might see. Nutcrack Night is an old Scottish and Northern English name for Halloween, also called the Oracle of the Nuts. A young man might give each nut a name of a possible sweetheart and watch to see which burned the brightest in the flame. In John Gay's poem, The Spell, the emotions of this game are evident. 2 hazelnuts I threw into the flame, and to each nut I gave a sweetheart's name. This with the loudest bounced me sore amazed, that in that flame of brightest color blazed. As blazed the nuts, so may thy passions grow, for 'twas thy nut that did so brightly glow. So that's how you chose a girlfriend. Throwing pecans or acorns or walnuts in a fire. There are many, many, many more journal entries. I think that was only 7 maybe. So if you want more, it's in the book. There's a lot of history. Like I say, everything that explains what their days were is factual. The journal entries are completely made up by me. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Yes, ma'am. I don't know. I got a wild imagination, I guess. When my children were little, and growing up in Wanchese, there was a lady there made up a story of Johnny Nepkin. I don't know if any of y'all have heard that story, but he was made up as a swamp man who wandered around the swamps and the marshes in Wanchese to deter the children from getting close to the creek and falling in and drowning. So when my children came along, I changed it to swamp genies. And my oldest son to this day is still angry with me for making up that story because he believed it. Heart and soul, he believed it. My mom's back door was probably as far as from here to that second light over there. And when he would leave where we lived and say, "Mama, watch me to Nanny's house," I'd have to go to the door and watch him as he flew across that backyard so the swamp genies wouldn't get him. And the story was that the swamp genies, if they got you, they took you in the woods and they tied you up with vines and they tickle you till you wet your pants. And the only way you could get away from the swamp genies was if your mama loved you enough to come get you. So in other words, don't make your mama mad. So when my second child come, he wouldn't let me carry on that tradition. Of course, Mom, there's no such thing as swamp genies. Perry, don't you believe it? There's no such thing as swamp genies. I don't know. It just, it seems to come natural. I really don't know. I never thought myself a storyteller, um, but I got a crazy imagination. You could probably do the same. Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you so much. Like I say, at the table outside there is some corn cob jelly. I'd love for you to stop and I stop and got some biscuits from Hardee's because they bake them better than I do. But there's a piece of biscuit there and some corn cob jelly if you'd like to taste it. Thank you again so much.